Welcome back, everybody. In this episode, we will discuss, authorization, status codes, and magic numbers. So let's get going. Now, if I switch to Firefox, in the last episode, we added support for displaying all notes that were created by a particular user. So in this case, we have 3, but of course, in the database, it looks like we have 5 notes. And notice that 2 of the notes were created by a different user, and that's why we don't see it here. Okay, so this is fine. Well, at least initially it seems fine. I can click through. Yeah, it looks good. But actually, it's not good. And maybe you picked up on this in the last episode. We have unwittingly introduced a major security concern. Think about it. What's to keep me right up here from passing through the ID of a note that was not created by me? Let's give it a shot. How about this one right here? The note with an ID of 6 was created by somebody else. Okay, let's see what happens if I try to load that note. Aha, it works. So again, this is a really big problem. Granted, in this case, they're dumb notes. It doesn't really matter. But in real life, the notes you create should not be accessible to anyone that has access to a browser, right? Clearly, this is a really big problem. So this is where authorization comes into play. Let's see how. Let's go into note.php. And remember, this is the controller that handles displaying this particular page. And we can see right here, we are grabbing the note that has an ID that matches the one that's currently in the note. And we can see right here, we are grabbing the note that has an ID that matches the one that's currently in the query string, as we see right there. So not a lick of authorization in place. All right, so we have a few ways that we might deal with this. Your first thought might be to simply update your SQL query like this. Select star from notes where the user ID matches the current user and the ID matches the one that's in the query string. Okay, so now if I were to clean this up real quick, we could pass them through. User is, and I'm going to just hard code it for now, because remember, we haven't yet reviewed authentication, but I promise we'll cover that in this series. At the moment, because remember, and I'm going to just hard code it for now, because put it for now, because remember, we haven't yet reviewed authentication, but I promise we'll cover that in this series. At the moment, though, we're just going to assume that the user with an ID of 1 is the currently authenticated user until we learn more. Okay, so let's give this a shot. If we come back and give it a refresh, I think it's going to change. And it does. We get a warning. Trying to access array offset on value of type bool. Okay, so maybe at the beginning of this series you wouldn't have known what that means, but now you do. What is type bool? A Boolean, true or false. So it looks like we have a value that's a Boolean, could be true, could be false, but we're trying to interact with that value as if it were an array. And why would that be? Well, let's inspect it. We'll come back to PHP Storm, and I will pass note to our dd function, and we'll inspect it. Give it a refresh, and sure enough, it's false. So now that note to our dd function, and we'll inspect it. Give it a refresh, and sure enough, it's false. So now that makes perfect sense. We load the view, and we are interacting with false as if it were an array, and that's why we get that error or that warning. Okay, so why is note equal to false? Well, it makes perfect sense. We didn't get anything from the database. Let's try a different record. We'll come back. Here's the ID of 7, and that note was created by the current user, so we return the appropriate record. Okay, so this seems to be working, but how do we deal with situations like this where false is returned? Well, we could do something like this. We could say, well, if there is not a note, then there was some kind of issue, right? So we can call our abort function and be done. So let's give it a shot. We come back to Firefox, give it a refresh, and yeah, it works, so I guess that's good. Come back to Firefox, give it a refresh, and yeah, it works, so I guess that's good, but it doesn't work in the way I would like. And here's what I mean. If you think about it, there's a couple different reasons why note would evaluate to false. Think about it. One reason would be you're trying to access a note with an ID that doesn't exist. So if I were to switch back, let's view the note with an ID of 6,000 or whatever that is, 600,000. Well, there is no corresponding record in the database, so we should say, sorry, page not found. But another reason might be due to this little section that we added here. All right, so imagine, yes, a corresponding note exists in the database, but you did not create it. Okay, so that's a very different thing. In the first example, we display a 404 because a note was not found. That makes sense. But in the second example, that's an authorization issue. Yes, the note exists, so it was found, but you are not authorized to view it. All right, so we can see that there's two different reasons why we might want to abort. And when we have these two different reasons, it might be useful to provide a hint or a status code that indicates what the problem is. Okay, so let's do this. Let's get rid of this check here, bring it back to a simple find note with the corresponding ID. Then we can say, well, if there's not a note, abort. We want to display a 404. But then let's add another one. We might say, well, if the note's user ID does not equal 1, well, then you're trying to access a note that was created by someone else. So we would abort in that case. But again, the 404 status code isn't quite right. Remember, a status code of 404 means page not found. But as we just discussed, in this particular example, that's not appropriate. Instead, I need some way to signal that, well, it was found, but you are not authorized to see it. And as it turns out, that corresponding status code is 403, a 403 forbidden. Okay, so now we've separated the two different reasons why we might not be able to access this particular note. So let's go back to Firefox, give it a refresh, and we get uncaught PDO exception invalid parameter. No, oh yeah, I'm sorry. We removed the user parameter, but I forgot to remove the binding as well. All right, so come back, give it a refresh, and there we go. So notice in this example, we are trying to access some fictional note that does not exist in the database. So we get a 4 of 4 page not found. But this time, let's change it back to 2, which is a note that was created by someone else. Okay, and you can see right here, it's trying to load our 403. View. So it seems like everything is working. We just need to create a corresponding view for that particular status code. So I'm going to copy 404. I renamed it to 403, and I'll update the heading to unauthorized. Okay, so come back, give that a refresh, and there we go. And in fact, if you want to be crystal clear here, you could say you are not authorized to view this page, just to make it crystal clear to the user. So switch back to notes. I see my notes. I can view a note, but view this page. There we go. Okay, just some view. It seems like every to 2, so we get not access some. There we go. Binding as well. All right, so moved the user parameter, but I forgot forgot to remove the binding as well. All right, so come back, give it a refresh, and there we go. So notice in this example, we are trying to access some fictional note that does not exist in the database. So we get a 4 of 4 page not found. But this time, let's change it back to 2, which is a note that was created by someone else. Okay, and you can see right here, it's trying to load our 4 of 2 are not authorized to view. Okay, so let's wrap up by quickly talking about magic numbers. Okay, so on this page alone, I can see 1, 2, what you might call magic numbers. And again, what is a magic number? You can think of it as a number that has significance or special meaning that is not explicitly declared. So yeah, in this case, 1. What does that mean? What is the significance of 1? Well, we know the answer to that question right now. We haven't yet reviewed sessions and authentication, so I'm hard coding that 1 to signify or to represent the current user, right? But yeah, imagine 6 months from now, you might forget what that 1 refers to. And this happens all the time, by the way. You're looking at code and you think, well, what does that mean? What is the meaning of that number? What does it refer to? Why is it important? And yeah, even if its meaning might seem obvious to you at the time, it could be that a year later or multiple years later, if this is a long-running application, it may not be so obvious. So one option would be to extract that to a variable. Let's just assign a name. I could say current user ID equals 1, and now I can substitute it here. Yeah, it's just a small tweak. And actually notice how we're breaking that guideline from an episode or 2 ago, where we noticed that we only declared a variable once, so we inlined it, right? But there's also situations where even though it's only being declared once, it still serves a purpose. It serves the purpose of identifying what the value is. It provides more clarity as to what the purpose. Yeah, it's a couple years later if this is a long